Increasing that. Now that it is. What I would do is create fun. And that way they're key.
All right, we're gonna get started. Welcome, everybody. It's 9:02 a.m. I'll call this meeting to order. Harmony, just as soon as you're ready, do call roll, please.
Bradley. Director Brems. Director Cardenas. Director Valley.
Here.
Director Keeley. Director Litvak.
Here.
Director Olson.
Present.
Director Peterson.
Here.
Director Prokopas.
Here.
Director Silvestrini.
Here.
Director Stevenson.
Here. Move into public comments. Do you have any public comments in the room? Any online? I've got one thing. Last week, as politicians, I think we all have to eat our words sometimes, and I need to do that right now. Last week, when we did the recognition of our county members, the sheriff, Councilman Bradley, Deputy Mayor Litvak, you all know I approached that in a certain way. As I was going through this, I think I approached that in a way that felt comfortable to me without quite thinking the ways that that may impact those that we were recognizing. And so I just wanted to apologize for that and just reiterate again to the sheriff, to Councilman Bradley, Deputy Mayor Litvak, just how much we appreciate your service on this board, your deep dedication to this organization, the work that you've all done for many years. And truly, it's been great to work with all of you, and this transition has been hard, but looking forward to continuing to work with each of you in a different capacity. You're starting to experience. So.
Don't be so sensitive, Mr. Long.
All right. Any last chance? Great. I'll move into item 3, approval of the Taylorsville settlement agreement and release resolution 240610.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. UPD, as you know, was sort of with a complaint. We had settlement discussions with Taylorsville. There had been at least an indication that the board would approve a settlement that included basically just paying the Taylorsville precinct fund balance to them in exchange for dismissal of all and release of all claims. Based upon that, we have entered into an agreement to that effect, and requesting board approval. If there are questions or if there's a need to go into a closed session for further explanation, we can, but I think we've covered the issue recently and we have covered it in the past as well. So the request would be, unless there are any questions, that we ask for board approval of the settlement.
Happy to make a motion to approve.
You've got a motion from Silvestrini. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we've got a second from Brems. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good work, Aaron.
Item 4, fiscal year 2023 to 2024 final budget amendments will first hear from Sheriff Rivera and
We're just going to turn the time over to Debbie because I haven't seen other than the attachments that were sent, so I haven't had a chance to.
Thank you, Chair and board members. So I did have to send a revised worksheet after the one that you received from Harmony because I had forgot to include the Valor grant. And that was for a training program that eventually will culminate in a celebratory baseball game with retired MLB players And I believe April, Deputy Chief April Morse presented that to you early in an earlier board meeting. I didn't have time to read exactly which one it was, but anyway, that had been presented, so that needed to be included. We did not have the information when we sent the last worksheet last week. We did not have the civilians that would be transferring over to the county. We did not have that information. We've got that now, and so we've updated the leave payouts in each one of your precincts and funds. And so those are now included as well. I believe, and then also now we also have included the settlement to Taylorsville. So that needs to be approved because that is an expense. But we have the fund in the Taylorsville fund balance to pay for that. And then Mayor Silvestrini, I have to thank you for reminding me this morning and because you were gracious enough to say, yes, we're going to pay for that fund deficit balance, but I forgot to include it in yours for that will also need to be included in here. I believe that figure was 248. I can't remember.
That was, well, I thought it was revised from that. We got an update that stays plus for 800.
298.
No, one.
Oh, 198. Okay.
I think you're correct.
Okay. All right.
So we just need to make sure that accurate number is in.
Okay, so if you would add 198 to yours as well in Mill Creek.
Yeah.
But Debbie will confirm that number. I know it was sent out in an email.
We sent out an email and there was a spreadsheet that showed it.
Yes.
Oh, that's just for your leave payouts. I'm talking about your the deficit.
Okay,
Okay, I took it as the deficit, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I thought that was down.
Okay,
Whatever the number is.
okay. And I don't want to have you approve a blanket number, but it will be what it is. And so I just need that to be.
Better be either one of you.
As well. Okay. And so unless you have any other questions, there's nothing else has changed since the presentation from last week.
Right? Questions for Debbie? All right, this is a public hearing, so I would entertain a motion to open that.
I moved to open the public hearing on the budget.
Thank you. We have a motion. Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we move into the public hearing. Do we have any public comment on this item? Any online public comments? See none. Take a motion to close the public hearing. You take motion second from Mayor Litvak and Mayor Silvestrini. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Close that and move on to the board discussion. Motion.
So first I want to just thank the board for allowing the county to have an opportunity to understand and review the year-end budget adjustments more thoroughly before we made a vote. And I want to thank Debbie in particular, Maz and Chief Dial for meeting with us and walking us through everything. So I know during your move week, it was a lot of work, but I want you to know how much we appreciated it. And I think we were very comfortable with most of the year-end adjustments, except for the ones related to the shared services fund paying for the move. And so I'd like to offer a motion that I think could resolve that from Salt Lake County's perspective as it relates to this item. So unless there's other discussion, I'd like to propose a motion.
Okay.
So without waiving any objections, Salt Lake County may have other ways to potential distribution of assets and liabilities. I move prior to making any additional payments out of shared services general fund balance and to account for the expenses Salt Lake County has been required to incur in this forced separation from UPD, that the sum of $141,250 be transferred from that fund into Salt Lake County's restricted precinct account. Doing so will enable Salt Lake County the same pro rata contribution from UPD from the shared services general fund for its moving expenses that we will incur based on the separation as is being given to the members of UPD who will remain after July 1st. And that's my motion.
I'll second that.
It's a motion in a second. Do we have discussion on that?
So, discussion of the motion. Debbie, do you want to speak to that?
This is the first I've heard of it, so, I guess I would need some more explanation as to how you came up with the figure and.
So there was an original appropriation of $330 in the 235 budget adjustment at the year end that totaled $565,000 coming out of shared services fund balance to pay for moving.
No, the moving was gonna be 235.
There was an original amount that was already budgeted. And there was an additional 235. For a total of 565, but that was in the paperwork that we had prior to maybe today. So we divided that by 0.8 for 80%. It gives you a 706, and the differential between those two is the 141,250. The county has contributed 20% to shared services since the onset, and we'd like a proportional share of the funds to help us pay for some of the expenses we will be incurring.
So that's, so you're relating that to the 20% that's being paid for by the county.
Correct.
And so for me, the share that each of the members pay into the general fund is for the services that are provided for the shared service fund. It's not meant to be redistributed back into each of the individual precincts or members. Because it's a service that's provided. And as we explained yesterday, the reason that we're asking for the 235 is because we're needing to move out of the sheriff's office building and into other precincts. Now you're saying that the county has a move that you need to.
We will have expenses related to the move that we will have to incur. And we're asking for an equal contribution from the shared services fund to help us pay for those. The only reason we're moving it into the precinct fund is because the precinct fund balance, whatever's remaining, should be returned to Salt Lake County. So instead of transferring it directly to Salt Lake County, we thought that would be a viable option.
What's the number of the county's moving expenses?
We're asking for a pro rata share, a proportional share to what you're utilizing out of the shared services fund to do so.
It'd be more appropriate to know what the exact.
Well, I'd like to know the details of every moving expense the UPD is incurring as well. Because we haven't seen any of that detail either.
Yeah, I sent that out this morning. I'm sorry, I was just trying to get.
And Debbie,
So Sharon, maybe you
Debbie
could
did send an
articulate.
itemized list of what was purchased, but just when you look at it, I mean, desks and chairs and things like that. Well, in this building, an example would be the county pays 60% of the records department. Every single chair is gone, so we have to replace the chairs. The county pays more for the mental health unit, those chairs are gone, so we have to replace chairs. We have to replace shredders that were taken as well. What we need to do is probably a deep dive of what was purchased out of countywide funds and then replace those. I know when much of that equipment was removed, they said only take what has blue tags. The challenge is before UPD was created, the county's asset tags were blue. And I think there's a misunderstanding of you shouldn't take every single blue tag, has to say UPD. And we changed that when UPD was created and made Salt Lake County tags a different color and left UPD's blue, but currently that county's is blue. And so we're having to replace it. I mean, the place is completely cleaned out, and to continue operations, your list has desks and chairs and various things for electrical and keys. Not really an accounting of keys. People just left the keys in desks. I know they are accounting for the ASA keys, but we have to replace locks. So there is a cost. But we were, waiting until everybody, moves out so we can get an account, it's gonna exceed the 141,000 for sure, just for logs to rekey them.
So we did have that, all of the keys be submitted to, I believe it's gonna be Abby. And they're gonna be all be submitted to her today. Because we didn't know, early in the week, what to do with them all, then we established that they would go to Abby. So I'm hoping that at that point, most of the keys will be accounted for.
And there again, most of the keys, that's the challenge of how do you have a secure facility where not sure on the keys, so we have to rekey. Those kind of things. There's quite a significant cost too. I think the 141 is fair. I mean, we're not asking for the 500,000. Yeah.
So
No, fair
here's-
enough. This-
But the process we're in is a budget amendment. The budget based on some of the normal. This juncture because you haven't heard it. There could be a discussion also about what things are appropriate or not. Whenever a tenant moves out of a building, the landlord has to do some refurbishment and things like that that aren't chargeable to the tenant. They're expense. So I think we can have a discussion about this in terms of the ultimate separation between the sheriff and UPD. And we know that we need an audit in order to do that. And I'm not prepared to amend this budget and then establish some kind of a precedent about distribution of effectively fund balance. We've already talked about that. I think that's not, we don't believe that anything appropriate at this point. I would suggest that, I think that from my standpoint, I'm prepared to be fair, but I want to see what the actual costs are and are they appropriately departmental costs versus something that the county would otherwise pay as the landlord of a departing tenant. So I think we can address this later, but I don't think it's appropriate as part of a budget.
I frankly disagree, and it's not usually the landlord's responsibility to help the tenant move either. And in this iteration, I would say we're paying 20% of the move of the UPD. So that's my perspective. I made the motion and there was a second. If you choose not to support it, that's your decision, but I needed to make the motion from a fairness standpoint.
Well, let me add also, if I may, we're adding a partnership that's worked very well. It's unfortunate that we are, in my opinion. And what we're asking here is just simply, the spirit of the partnership that we've operated under over the past number of years, that the county is entitled to the similar amount of money that's associated with our cost during this fiscal year, and the same pro rata amount of 20% of the total. It's pretty simple math. We're saying 20% is what everybody's getting. We're not been asked before to itemize each of these. None of the precincts are itemizing costs in terms of the move. And so, that formula, I think, it's a pretty simple concept. I have a hard time wondering why you would object to fairness of treating us like all the precincts are being treated. That's the way we've operated over the past years. Why would you change now? We're talking about $141,000. So I believe that Aaron has spoken to this in a good way, that you ought to give it serious consideration. And I think it should be part of it.
I don't disagree that, the county is going to probably incur some moving expenses. We just don't know what that's going to be. And then we also have to, like Mayor Silverstein pointed out, I think that's probably more appropriate when we go into the separation and do based on what the departure formula is. Because I'm not sure that I don't think that we're in agreement with the 20%. And so I just think it should be addressed at that time. I don't disagree that there's an expense there. I just say I think it needs to be addressed at another time and not at this budget amendment.
And I can comment as well. We haven't had the expense yet, and had we had the expense, we would never have spent the money without the board's approval. What's happened here is that money was spent, and then we got an email prior to the previous board meeting with those numbers, and it's like, who approved that money being expended? Because it didn't come from the CEO. So that's, you know, a challenge that we're going to end up going down the road that, you know, that probably the attorneys are going to have to answer, but I didn't know we were spending money on UPD's move. And it's already spent. But we did not spend the money because I felt like it has to first come to the board for approval before you spend the money. You already spent it.
And that is unfortunate, and maybe what we should have done, you know, in hindsight was probably called another meeting. I mean, we didn't know what those costs were gonna be. We had to do them because we had to move out before July 1st. And we just needed to move forward. And so I will own that. We should have probably addressed that earlier, and so for that, I apologize. Unfortunately, now it's.
I'd like to hear from.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make a comment as well, and we will reiterate this till the cows come home, is that I don't know that we're subject to the departure formula. We did not withdraw. This has been a mutual agreed upon separation, a forced separation based on legislation. And so you keep referring back to that, and we've said it over and over again, and we'll continue to. We did not withdraw from UPD.
So if I could just address a couple of issues. The proposed budget amendment are moving expenses that essentially were required to be done this year because our lease agreement on county buildings states that we need to be out by the end of the lease if the county is no longer a member. That date is June 30th. So because of that, these expenses were both necessary this year for that purpose. And we've also vacated a building that the county can move into. We've left behind a significant amount of property. We've left behind switches that are worth $5,000. We've left a lot behind. And so ultimately, this is an issue, I believe, that's better dealt with in terms of whatever final reckoning process we're going to have with the county, whether it's the formula or something else. We've been talking about that. Also, I just want to point out one other thing. I know that there's a fairness argument here. I told the mayor yesterday it's appropriate to make it to the board, but in terms of legally, is this an appropriate expense for this year? I believe it is. Finally, on a budget amendment for this year, I don't know if it's even appropriate to make a decision on this year's budget to transfer money for next year's expense for Salt Lake County's move, because it's something that I think is just simply more appropriately dealt with. We have done a lot of things to cooperate in this move, including transferring vehicles beyond what were in the precinct, looking at agreement to loan radios and weapons and other things to the county until they can purchase those, transferring vehicles so they can be restriped at a time. I think that in terms of this is much more appropriately made as an ultimate resolution issue rather than a budget amendment for this year. So just for the reasons that we had to be out, I think it's an appropriate expense for this year. And I do think that issues like this are much better reserved for an ultimate resolution.
I agree with that. I mean, I'm going to vote against the motion because I think it's not that we aren't going to consider this, but it's inappropriate to amend the budget without an invoice, without knowable expenses. Then we're encroaching onto, what is that termination mechanism. We will deal with that. I think we'll be, fair with the county. We appreciate the county as our partner, and we will, work together going forward. But it's not appropriate to amend a budget when you don't have a knowable expense or anything. That's a distribution to somebody that looks like a termination thing.
And I agree. And I mean, I don't agree with what you're saying, and I will state again that I've made the motion. But I would argue that it's inappropriate to spend the money unless you've had it appropriated as well, and that's been done. So I understand the timing issue, I understand everything. I'm not arguing that we haven't worked together to try to resolve these issues. This is an issue that was dropped on us at the last minute. I'm trying to find an amicable solution that would make us comfortable, and it's the board's discretion to vote for or against it.
McCullough.
All right, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed.
Oh, sorry. And I'd like to ask for a vote, like a
A roll call?
roll call vote. Thank you.
This is in favor of the motion, correct?
Is it
Favor of the motion I made.
Director Bradley,
Aye.
Director Brem,
No.
Director Cardenas, Director Dally,
no?
Director Keithley. No. Director Litvak,
Yes.
Director Olson,
Stay.
Director Peterson,
No.
Director Prokopis,
No.
Director Silvestrini.
No.
Director Stevenson.
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to approve the budget amendment as presented as resolution 24-06-06 of 2020.
With an amendment to your.
With the amendment that no pay its deficit, which it would not exceed $250,000.
I would ask for a roll call vote again, please.
We do have a motion.
Second.
Second, thank you so much. Any further discussion on that? Harmony, as soon as you're ready.
Director Bradley,
No.
Director Brems,
Yes.
Director Cardenas, Director Dally,
Yes.
Director Keithley,
Yes.
Director Litvak,
No.
Director Olson,
Yes.
Director Peterson, Director Prokopis,
Yes.
Director Silvestrini,
Yes.
Director Stevenson.
Yes. Okay, that passes. Thank you for that discussion. Move on to item 5, coverage of the Cobra insurance premium for member transitioning to the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office on July 1st, 2024, resolution 2406 and 11.
Good morning. So we have found ourselves in a situation with members departing from the UPD and going to the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. Because of the timing of our pay periods, the current pay period ends tomorrow at midnight. And in order for us to fund benefits for those folks that are going to the county, they would need to work more than just the 8 hours or 10 hours that they would normally work on Sunday. And some people won't work at all because they're not scheduled to work. So what has been proposed? Well, let me back up. Because of that timing, the members transitioning will lose their insurance at midnight on tomorrow night, June 29th. And so what we're proposing is that if a member were to have an insurable event on June 30th from midnight to midnight, that UPD would either pay that expense directly or pick up the COBRA premium for those individuals so that they have coverage. It's not their fault that they're losing their coverage. It's just the circumstance of where we find ourselves. And so that's the proposal, is that we just protect them in case there's an insurable event during that time. If it was an event that like just needed stitches or something, UPD would like to just pay those costs directly because it's a lot less than the corporate premium would be. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. Does anyone have questions about that?
There's just a 1 day gap.
There is, there's a 1 day gap based on the timing of the pay period.
Everybody be safe. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 24.
That is so strange. So I know this isn't really that big of a deal, but I just want to make sure that I've got it straight in my head, okay? So there is a 1 day gap in coverage. I do get that. This is for all officers transitioning from Unified Police Department over to the county.
Officers and civilians, yes.
Officers and civilians. Thank you. So that coverage is covered by UPD. This COBRA coverage is covered by UPD.
It would be. Yes.
It would be covered by UPD. And so is the county sharing any of those expenses?
No, that's not the proposal. The expense would only be incurred if there were an insurable event. So if there's no problem, there's no cost to UPD at all.
Mark, do you want to explain if we don't do this, then all those employees go into the next pay period?
The next,
Because if they work it So if one of those employees works, you said some don't,
Right,
it impacts the UPD pay periods.
it does.
And would cost more money.
Yeah, so the.
So if you would explain that so they can understand that it's really trying to save some, UPD.
So maybe I can explain it this way. So their last day here would be the 30th. And then they start on the 1st at the county. There's no gap in coverage there. But because of the payroll issue and the timing of the end of our payroll, there is going to be one gap. This gap actually benefits the UPD in terms of significant savings. But because of that, it in some ways penalizes employees who would resign on the 30th because they won't have coverage because they won't be working in that time period. So it is to benefit us that the 29th, we said, don't schedule anybody leaving to go to the county. So we don't have a pour over into July and a pour over into our budget in July. So it does benefit us that 29th, nobody works after the 29th, benefits UPD from having to carry over expenses into the next year. Because of that, the county requested that we do this, and I personally believe it's appropriate because we're saving money by not letting people work beyond the 29th, but we still will cover a covered event on one of the things that I think is important is that unless it's an expense and it's a 30-day COBRA we're paying for.
Yeah, it'd be 30 days.
Okay, so it would just state that rather than covering everybody, because of the 1-day gap, cover them if we need to. The 29th cutoff still benefits the UPD financially, so I don't have a problem recommending this, even though, and I would point out that the budget for these people starts on the 1st with the county. So they would have to go back if we were to talk about this, and it may be nothing. It may be $1,200 or something to make the adjustment and ask the county to pay for that. At this point was not possible because of the timing of meetings. I thought about it, but in reality, I think this does benefit us the most, and therefore I would recommend, I think it's appropriate that we pay this coverage if it's necessary. And we even put in and out there that if it's something that falls below the cost of COBRA, we just pay the provider directly. So if it's a $200 medical bill in urgent care or something like that, that's something that is just cheaper to pay than COBRA. But that's why we're doing it. The 29th cutoff benefits us, and yet it does create a 1-day gap. So from between people resigning from the UPD and starting in the county.
So no costs incurred, unless there is an insurable event.
Correct.
I did not know that you could do, like if I break my leg, I can go out and get insurance after the fact.
Yes.
I had no idea you could do that.
Cobra.
Yeah, under
I could get COBRA insurance.
you have to pay the premium.
Right.
Yes, if you have, I think it's up to 60 days.
60 days.
Right, to reinstate your insurance from whatever the employer is under COBRA, but then you have to pay the full cost premium during that time period to have that coverage. So it is something that's available for virtually anyone. It's portable health insurance, at least for a time period after you leave one employer.
That answers all the rest of my questions. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, well, I was making it, but it's resolution 24-06-11 for 2024. I need to approve the resolution as presented.
Here we have a motion from Street, a second from Keating. Perfect. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other business today? So a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to second. Still need a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Jim, you're almost there.